Jordan, are we on? Are we rolling? Jordan? Welcome back, DP Review TV viewers. Somewhat unexpectedly, I seem to be here with the Nikon Z8. I'm in New York. I'm just about to hit the High Line and go and see if there are any people who are happy to have their photo taken. So just what is this camera? It's built around a 47 megapixel stacked CMOS sensor. It's able to shoot at 20 frames per second, or JPEGs at 30 frames per second, or even more at smaller resolutions. It can shoot 8K video at up to 60p, RAW video, H.264, H.265, ProRes RAW. In fact, all of these specs may seem pretty familiar. That's because in almost every respect, it's essentially the same spec as the Z9, only smaller and appreciably cheaper. There's been a lot of speculation, but now we know that the Z8 will have a list price of $3,999. This makes it the least expensive camera to have a full-framed stacked CMOS sensor. So despite having all the features of the Z9, the Z8 is a significantly smaller camera. Nikon says that it's 30% smaller than the Z9, and indeed 15% smaller than the D850. So I spent the afternoon wandering along the High Lines getting portraits, and with its subject recognition and its eye detection, this hasn't really been much of a challenge for the Z8 at all. To really put this camera through its paces, I'd really want to get out, shoot some landscape, shoot some wildlife, and all the other things that, as basically a baby Z9, it should be capable of. I've just got back to my hotel room and had a first chance to have a look through some of my images. I'd also like to speak a little bit about my experiences with the camera and go over some of the details I haven't got to yet. In terms of handling, the Z8 felt, well, a lot like a Nikon, to be honest. The dials were placed exactly where I expected them to be, as were all the other controls. It's a camera that's likely to feel immediately familiar to D850 users, and I have to assume that's not by mistake. In terms of size though, although Nikon says it's 15% smaller than the D850, it's still a pretty substantial camera, probably sort of D750 sized. In terms of image quality, I wouldn't expect many differences compared to the D850, except of course you can mount Z-mount glass on the new camera. It also offers Synchro VR, the system by which the lenses IS and the in-body IS work in collaboration to provide up to 6 stops of correction. In order to make the camera smaller than the Z9, the Z8 uses a much smaller EN-EL15C battery, the same one used in a lot of Nikon's other cameras. This has about half the capacity of the battery used in the Z9, and we'd expect the battery life figures to fall accordingly. Of course, the other big difference to the D850 is that the Z8 doesn't have a mechanical shutter. Instead, it always uses an electronic shutter that reads out at around 1/280th of a second. This is fast enough to allow the camera to sync with flashes at up to 1/200th. These speeds are comparable to those of mechanical shutters, and in recent firmware, Nikon has added a feature to the Z9 that allows you to sync the shutter to your light source to reduce the risk of banding. The last interesting feature I want to draw your attention to is that the Z8 is the first camera we've encountered to have twin USB-C sockets. This means you can use one for data transfer, or say tethering, while you use the other one to provide power to the camera. They're not ever in conflict. The final thing I wanted to touch on was price. $4,000 is a significant increase over the price of the D850, but it's only $100 more than the launch price of Canon's EOS R5, which is clearly a direct competitor. And if your photography benefits from either the speed or the video capabilities of the Z8, it's worth noting that this is $500 less expensive than the previous cheapest stacked full-frame sensor camera, Sony's original A9. We think there's going to be a lot of excitement about the Nikon Z8, not least because we're really excited about the Nikon Z8. We're hoping to get a production copy of the camera soon so we can get it into our studio and go out shooting with it. As soon as we do, we'll be posting more here on DP Review TV and indeed dpreview.com. Please stay tuned.